"Get out of here! You don't belong in that seat!" The words tore through the solemn courtroom like a whip, every syllable laced with arrogance and rage. Cameras swung, heads snapped, and in an instant of public humiliation, a white police officer's hand clamped down on the robe of a black woman, Judge Emmason, and yanked her from the bench. The symbol of justice itself dragged across the floor in front of gasping witnesses. Before we dive deep, what country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. Also, if injustice makes your chest burn, hit subscribe right now. Because what you're about to hear is the story of a black woman they tried to strip of dignity, only to learn she owned far more than the robe they tried to rip away. Judge Emmason was more than a woman in a black robe. She was history written in flesh, resilience wrapped in grace, the kind of presence that silenced noise without raising her voice. Born to a working-class family, she knew from childhood that life would not hand her respect. She would have to carve it out of stone. From late nights studying by candlelight to mornings fighting dismissive professors, Emmason forged herself into an unbreakable force. When doors closed, she built new ones. When they whispered she wasn't fit to lead, she walked to the front anyway. Her gavel was more than wood. It was a weapon of justice. But her achievements went far beyond the bench. Emmason was also the founder and owner of one of the most prestigious black-owned law firms in the country, a powerhouse that represented corporations, defended civil rights, and trained a generation of young attorneys. Her name was on the building. Her influence was in contracts stretching across the state. And yet, to one officer blinded by arrogance, none of that mattered. The courtroom buzzed with routine hearings. Papers shuffled, lawyers rehearsed, families waited. Judge Emmason entered, robes flowing, eyes steady. For many, she was a beacon, proof that justice could look like them. But not for the officer stationed near the bench. His stare lingered too long, heavy with suspicion, coated in the poison of bias. To him, this black woman in authority was an insult. He waited, itching for a chance to make his contempt public. The chance came quickly. During a minor case, he stormed forward, boots cracking against the polished floor. With a booming voice, he accused her of not being a real judge, claiming she was impersonating authority. Gasps spread like wildfire. Was this man serious? Before anyone could intervene, the officer climbed the steps, grabbed her robe, and yanked her down with brute force. Her gavel struck the floor, rolling into the silence. Phones rose into the air, capturing the unthinkable. A black female judge being dragged like a criminal from her own courtroom. The humiliation was electric, spreading across every witness like fire. Some screamed, others froze, many filmed, unable to believe what they were seeing. By nightfall, the video was everywhere. Cop drags black judge from courtroom plastered across screens, hashtags flooding timelines, outrage boiling into fury. Feminists demanded answers. Civil rights leaders condemned the violence. Even seasoned journalists admitted they had never seen such blatant contempt for authority. But Emmason? She stayed silent. She did not rant online. She did not appear on talk shows. Her silence was not weakness. It was calculation, because she knew something the officer didn't. She wasn't just a judge. She was the owner of the very law firm that had contracts with the city government, the police department, and multiple state agencies. The officer thought he had humiliated a woman. He had actually declared war on his own employer's legal backbone. The next day, Emmason didn't return to the courtroom as a victim. She returned as a storm. Wearing her robe with unbroken pride, she walked to the bench with her attorneys, her own firm's senior partners, flanking her like an army. She presented a thick dossier, legal contracts signed by the very department that officer worked for, documents proving that her firm, Miles and Emmason Legal Group, represented the police union, defended city cases, and even handled misconduct claims. The irony was thunderous. The officer who dragged her out of her own courtroom had unknowingly disgraced the woman who signed off on his department's legal defense. The audience gasped, lawyers whispered, cameras flashed. The arrogance of one man had cracked the spine of an entire institution. Within hours, formal complaints were filed, lawsuits launched, investigations ignited. The officer was suspended, his badge stripped, his reputation destroyed. But Emmason didn't stop there. She pressed forward with civil rights litigation, turning his act of humiliation into a case study in systemic racism and gendered disrespect. Every network carried it. Every citizen debated it. The story of a black female judge dragged from her courtroom only to reveal she owned the law firm that controlled the city's justice system became a legend. What began as arrogance ended as ruin. What started as humiliation ended as history. Judge Emason's name was no longer just tied to rulings or contracts. It became a banner of dignity, resilience, and the unshakable truth that you cannot drag power off its throne. And as the officer faded into disgrace, Emmason stood taller than ever, her robe no longer just a symbol of the bench, but of every woman, every black professional, every soul who had been told they didn't belong. If this story gripped you, don't just leave. Subscribe now, because tomorrow we bring another tale of arrogance shattered, of racism exposed, of justice served. Stories like this are not just entertainment. They are reminders that no matter how deep the wound of humiliation, dignity always finds a way to rise.